Sign or walk away, my husband demanded, waving the estate transfer documents in the mansion I'd built from the ground up. He smirked as if forcing me out would destroy me. I signed, placed the keys on the marble console table, and left. The next morning, his lawyer called him in a panic. Do you understand what you've done? That woman you just threw out, do you have any idea who Isabella Hadley really is? We need to discuss the estate. Now. Before we continue with the story, be sure to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. Oh, and drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from. We love seeing that. Roland's cologne hit me at 6:30 a.m. when I returned to collect my grandmother's jewelry, and I found him in my private study, dressed in the Tom Ford suit I'd bought him for a charity gala he'd complained was boring. He'd spread my business documents across the mahogany desk, acquisition contracts, property deeds, foundation portfolios arranged like trophies he'd already won. I've reviewed everything, he announced, sliding a folder toward the edge. It's time we clarify ownership in this marriage. Maya will need security for our child. The folder was embossed with his initials. Gold lettering, expensive leather. The kind of accessory purchased by men compensating for accomplishments they'd never earned. Roland had positioned himself in my custom Italian chair, the one I'd commissioned after closing the Meridian deal, the acquisition that had quadrupled my portfolio's value in 18 months. The morning sun through the floor-to-ceiling windows cast sharp shadows across his face, and I noticed he'd relocated my Harvard Business School degree to make space for his theatrical presentation. You went through my private files? Not a question. The locked filing system containing acquisition agreements worth 8 figures, philanthropic trust documents that fed 3 children's hospitals, family estate papers that predated Roland by a decade. Our files, Roland corrected, leaning back with practiced confidence. Marriage means shared assets, Isabella. 50/50. That's what standard law dictates. Standard law. The phrase lingered while I studied the man I'd married 4 years ago. At that vineyard ceremony he'd insisted was too small for someone of his vision. Roland wore the Patek Philippe watch I'd given him for our second anniversary, the one he'd immediately researched to confirm its resale value. His hair was styled with my $300 styling product. Even his posture had transformed, shoulders back, chin elevated like he'd been rehearsing this performance for weeks. I stepped closer, observing how he'd organized my documents in deliberate stacks. The property tax records showing every quarterly payment I'd made since purchasing this estate. The deed dated 7 years before Roland's name entered any document in my life. The trust fund paperwork from my grandmother, who'd immigrated with nothing and built a textile business through 30 years of relentless work. Your lawyer, I repeated softly, lifting the Castellano merger contract he'd pushed aside. This single transaction had generated more capital than Roland had earned in his entire 39 years, including the consulting work he'd claimed justified his executive lifestyle. He shifted in my chair, the chair custom designed by a Danish architect who'd won awards I actually understood. This is different. This protects both our futures. Maya's pregnancy changes everything. Both our futures. I picked up his folder, noting his handwriting hasty, aggressive strokes. He'd titled it Marital Asset Division and listed everything I owned. My grandmother's emerald collection, the Aspen property my father left me, the original Basquiat I'd purchased to celebrate my first foundation grant. Roland stood, circling the desk to face me directly. I've contributed significantly to this marriage, Isabella. While you built your empire, I maintained our lifestyle. I provided emotional support during your stressful acquisitions. Maintained our lifestyle. I thought about the private chef I employed because Roland's cooking attempts always ended with takeout. The estate manager I hired after Roland forgot to pay the property insurance. The personal assistant who managed our calendar while Roland attended networking events that never produced a single professional connection. Is that what you told your lawyer? I asked, noticing a business card partially hidden under the mortgage papers. That you maintained our lifestyle while I worked? I've made sacrifices, Roland insisted, his voice hardening. I postponed my own ventures for this marriage. The hedge fund I was planning to launch. The real estate development firm that was ready to scale. The hedge fund that never had investors. The development firm that never owned property. The ventures that existed only in Roland's imagination, while he spent my money on luxury gym memberships and business-class flights to conferences where he networked with other men who had no actual businesses. I moved to the window overlooking the sculpture garden I'd designed, where I'd installed pieces from emerging artists my foundation supported. The garden my grandmother would have loved, purchased with wealth she'd worked herself to exhaustion to create. "The estate is mine, Roland," I said quietly, watching the gardener tend to the rose beds. It was mine 7 years before we met. 3 days after Roland's theatrical performance in my study, I returned to the estate to finalize arrangements with my legal team. The house felt different now, violated, contaminated by his presence in spaces that had once been mine alone. I'd scheduled the meeting for noon, knowing Roland kept late mornings after his networking dinners that stretched past midnight. I was wrong about his schedule. Roland's voice drifted from the terrace as I crossed through the conservatory, low, intimate, punctuated by laughter I hadn't heard in years. Not the performative chuckle he used at charity events, but genuine amusement, the kind of warmth he'd shown me exactly twice during our 4-year marriage. "She'll sign whatever I need," Roland was saying, his tone casual, dismissive. The lawyer confirmed that once the transfer processes, everything becomes marital property. The foundation assets, the real estate portfolio. All of it. I stopped behind the marble column, my breath catching. "And the baby?" A woman's voice, young, uncertain. "Roland, you promised we'd—" "Maya, relax." Roland's footsteps moved across the terrace stones. "Once this is finalized, we'll have everything we need." The prenup she signed was worthless. My attorney found 3 exploitable clauses. Isabella built an empire, but she was sloppy about protecting it. She trusted me. The way he said my name like I was a business transaction he'd successfully closed sent ice through my veins. I should have walked away. Should have returned to my car and let my legal team handle the discovery process properly. Instead, I pulled out my phone and activated the recording function, my hands steadier than I expected. "What about the timing?" the woman, Maya, asked. "She signed the papers, but the lawyer said there's a review period. What if she realizes?" "She won't." Roland's confidence was absolute. "Isabella is brilliant at acquisitions and foundation work, but she's emotionally compromised. She actually loved me. Can you imagine? A woman worth hundreds of millions, and she married me because she believed I supported her vision." Maya laughed, the sound sharp and practiced. "You've been planning this for how long?" "Since month 6. Roland's admission came easily, like he was discussing stock positions. The moment I understood the full scope of her wealth. The estate alone is worth $40 million. Add the foundation assets, the investment portfolio, the art collection, we're talking about a 9-figure fortune. All I had to do was play the supportive husband long enough to establish legal claims. My throat tightened. 4 years. 4 years of performances I'd interpreted as genuine partnership. And she never suspected? Maya's voice held a note of admiration that made my stomach turn. Why would she? I was perfect. Attended her galas, praised her philanthropic work. Let her believe I was this misunderstood entrepreneur waiting for the right opportunity. She actually felt sorry for me. Roland paused. The pregnancy was brilliant timing, by the way. Nothing establishes future financial obligation quite like a child. The baby. The element that had seemed like collateral damage was actually strategy. I backed away from the column, my pulse hammering against my ribs. The recording was still running. 13 minutes of Roland dismantling our entire marriage, reducing 4 years to a calculated theft. My hands were shaking now, but not from heartbreak. Something else was building beneath the shock. Something colder and far more dangerous than grief. I'd spent the morning believing I was a fool, a successful businesswoman who'd missed obvious signs of betrayal. The texts I'd ignored when Roland claimed they were potential investors. The late nights I'd excused as networking. The expensive gifts I'd assumed were purchased with his mysterious consulting income that never seemed to produce actual tax documents. But standing in my own conservatory, listening to my husband choreograph my financial destruction with his pregnant mistress, I realized something crucial. Roland had made one catastrophic miscalculation. He'd assumed that because I loved him, I was weak. He'd confused compassion with incompetence, generosity with gullibility. He'd spent 4 years studying my business empire, while fundamentally misunderstanding the woman who built it. The same woman who'd turned a modest inheritance into a fortune, who'd negotiated hostile acquisitions with venture capitalists twice her age, who'd built 3 successful foundations from concept to full operation. Roland saw what he wanted to see, a lonely philanthropist, desperate for companionship, easy to manipulate, easier to steal from. What he'd actually done was declare war on someone who'd spent 15 years winning. I ended the recording and copied it to 3 separate secure locations. Then I opened my contacts and scrolled to a name I'd hoped never to use. Rachel Morrison, the attorney whose reputation for destroying fraudulent spouses was legendary enough that her retainer alone cost 6 figures. The phone rang twice before her assistant answered. "I need an emergency consultation," I said quietly, my voice perfectly steady. "Today, and I need it off the books. May I ask the nature of asset protection in a hostile divorce situation involving fraud, deception, and attempted theft of a 9-figure estate? Tell Rachel that Isabella Hadley is calling. She'll understand the urgency." Through the conservatory windows, I could see Roland on the terrace, phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something Maya had said. He looked relaxed, confident, certain of his victory. He had no idea the war had just begun. Rachel Morrison's preliminary assessment took 48 hours. During that time, I maintained absolute silence, no contact with Roland, no visible reaction to his continued occupation of my estate. I worked from my foundation office downtown, reviewed acquisition proposals, attended board meetings. To anyone observing, I appeared to be proceeding with normal operations while my marriage dissolved. Roland interpreted my silence as defeat. I discovered this on Thursday morning when my assistant forwarded me a link with a single word: Isabella. The video had been posted 6 hours earlier on Roland's Instagram account, which I'd stopped following 2 years ago when his posts became exclusively about entrepreneurial mindset and wealth attraction strategies. He'd accumulated 43,000 followers mostly. Other aspiring entrepreneurs who confused motivational quotes with actual business acumen. This post was different. The video opened on the estate's terrace, the same location where I'd overheard his conversation with Maya. Roland stood in frame wearing the cashmere sweater I'd bought him in Milan, one arm draped around a woman I'd never seen in person. She was younger than I'd imagined, mid-20s, with carefully styled hair and the kind of cultivated beauty that required significant financial investment. "New chapter starting," Roland announced to the camera, his smile wide and performative. "Some of you have been asking about changes in my life. Yes, I've made significant decisions recently. This is Maya, and we're expecting our first child together." Maya leaned into him, her hand resting on a barely visible baby bump. She looked directly at the camera with practiced ease, like she'd rehearsed this moment. "We're so grateful," she added, her voice sweet and measured. "Roland has been incredibly generous, and we're building something beautiful together." The camera panned across the terrace, lingering on the sculpture garden, the infinity pool, the view that had been featured in Architectural Digest 3 years ago when I'd completed the renovation. "This estate represents a new beginning," Roland continued, gesturing expansively. "Everything you see here is part of our future. Maya and our child will have the life they deserve, and I'm proud to provide that for them." The video was 2 minutes and 17 seconds of Roland claiming ownership of my life's work. The comments section was already filling with congratulations, heart emojis, and questions about his success secrets. 47,000 views in 6 hours. The algorithm was pushing it to more audiences with every share. I watched it 3 times, taking notes. Then I scrolled to Maya's account, which Roland had tagged. Her profile was public, a strategic error that suggested she'd never been involved in legal proceedings before. Her most recent post, uploaded 2 hours after Roland's video, showed her standing in my conservatory, sunlight streaming through the glass ceiling I'd commissioned from a Swedish designer. The caption read, "Touring Isabella's estate today. Can't believe this will be our home soon. Roland says once everything transfers, We can finally start planning the nursery. So blessed to be starting this journey. Number new beginnings. Number blessed life. Number dream home. Isabella's estate. I read the phrase 4 times, my pulse steady and cold. Maya had just confirmed, in writing with timestamp and geolocation data, that she understood the property belonged to me. That the transfer Roland mentioned was an active process, not a completed transaction. That she knew exactly whose home she was occupying. I forwarded both posts to Rachel Morrison with a subject line, Exhibit A and B. Her response came within minutes. This is extraordinary. They've documented the entire fraud scheme. I'm expediting the emergency filing. Can you meet this afternoon? I could. By noon, I was sitting in Rachel's corner office overlooking the financial district, watching her legal team analyze Roland's social media presence with the efficiency of a forensic investigation. He's been posting about the estate for 3 days, one of the associates reported, scrolling through Roland's account on a large monitor. 14 posts total, each one claiming ownership or implying permanent residence. The metadata shows he's geotagging from your property address. Maya's account is even better, another associate added. She's posted interior photos of 6 different rooms, tagged luxury brands in your art collection, and described future renovation plans. There's a story post from this morning where she films herself choosing paint colors for what she calls the master suite. Rachel leaned back in her leather chair, a predator's smile crossing her face. Your husband has just provided us with a documented timeline of fraudulent intent. Every post is time-stamped evidence that he knowingly misrepresented ownership of your assets. The pregnancy announcement adds another layer. He's establishing future financial need, using property he doesn't own. Can we use all of this in court? I asked, though I already knew the answer from her expression. Social media evidence is increasingly admissible in divorce proceedings, particularly in cases involving asset disputes and fraud claims, Rachel explained, pulling up case precedents on her tablet. The American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers reports that 81% of divorce attorneys now regularly use social media evidence. Courts recognize digital footprints as legitimate documentation of intent and behavior. She tapped the screen, highlighting specific legal citations. What makes Roland's posts particularly valuable is the combination of visual documentation, written claims of ownership, geolocation data, and public timestamps. He's created an irrefutable record of his deception. And Maya's admission that it's my estate? That's the smoking gun. Rachel's smile widened. She's confirmed in a public, permanent format that she knows the property belongs to you, that a transfer is pending, and that she and Roland are planning to occupy it anyway. That demonstrates conscious participation in fraudulent acquisition of assets. I watched the monitor as the associate scrolled through more posts. Roland posing by my vintage car collection. Maya photographing herself wearing jewelry from my safe. Both of them treating my home like a vacation property they'd won in a lottery. He thinks he's celebrating, I said quietly. He's building our case. Rachel corrected. Every post, every comment, every share creates additional evidence of fraudulent intent. The more he flaunts, the stronger your position becomes. She opened a legal filing on her laptop, the document already 40 pages deep with exhibits. We're requesting an emergency hearing for next week. Fraudulent transfer of assets, breach of fiduciary duty, and several other claims that will freeze everything Roland thinks he's acquired. These social media posts will serve as primary evidence. I looked at the monitor one more time, at Roland's smug expression as he gestured toward my sculpture garden, claiming it as his own. He'd made a fundamental miscalculation. He'd confused my silence for surrender, my absence for defeat. Roland Kitchen had just handed me everything I needed to destroy him, and he'd done it for 47,000 strangers on Instagram. The freeze happened at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know this because Roland called my office exactly 11 minutes later, his voice hitting a register I'd never heard before. High, strained, edged with something close to panic. "What did you do?" he demanded, skipping any pretense of civility. "My cards aren't working. The bank says the accounts are frozen." I leaned back in my office chair, watching the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Rachel had warned me this call would come. She'd filed the emergency motion Monday afternoon, and the court had granted temporary orders faster than Roland's limited legal knowledge could have anticipated. The court ordered asset preservation, I said calmly, reviewing the quarterly foundation report on my screen. Standard procedure in contested divorce cases involving suspected fraud. You can't do this. His breathing was audible now, ragged. Those are joint accounts. I have rights to that money. Had rights, I corrected gently. Past tense. The court issued a temporary restraining order, preventing either of us from accessing marital accounts until the investigation concludes. You should have received the paperwork this morning. Silence stretched across the line, filled with the sound of Roland processing this information. Investigation? His voice had dropped an octave, trying to regain composure. What investigation? Into fraudulent transfer of assets, breach of fiduciary duty, and several other interesting claims my legal team filed yesterday. Your social media posts were particularly helpful in establishing a timeline. The silence this time lasted longer. I could almost hear his mind racing, recalculating, searching for angles he'd missed. Isabella, let's be reasonable. I am being reasonable, Roland. The court is ensuring neither party can dissipate marital assets during proceedings. It's actually quite fair. I paused, savoring the moment. Though I imagine it's inconvenient for you specifically, given your spending patterns. He hung up without another word. By Friday, the consequences were manifesting in ways even I hadn't fully anticipated. Rachel's investigative accountant, a former IRS auditor with the temperament of a hunting dog, had spent the week tracking Roland's financial activity. The report landed on my desk that afternoon, 47 pages documenting 4 years of methodical theft disguised as marriage. He's been maintaining a lifestyle requiring approximately $73,000 monthly, the accountant explained during our conference call, her voice clinical and precise. Your joint accounts funded 100% of his expenditures. The consulting income he reported on tax returns? Fabricated. We found no corresponding business entity, no client contracts, no legitimate revenue sources. I scanned the itemized breakdown. Private chef, $8,000 monthly. Personal trainer, $4,000. Designer clothing, averaging $12,000 quarterly. The vintage Rolex he'd bought for networking, $47,000. The Tesla he'd claimed was a business write-off, $92,000, financed through our joint accounts. 4 years of this? I asked, though the numbers were clear. 4 years, 2 months, 13 days, she confirmed. We're estimating total unauthorized expenditures approaching $3.2 million. $3.2 million of my wealth, spent maintaining Roland's illusion of success. The accountant continued. More concerning are the recent transactions. In the 3 weeks before you signed the estate transfer documents, Roland made unusual purchases. He paid 6 months advance rent on a luxury apartment downtown, $38,000. He opened new credit cards using the estate as collateral, 5 cards, combined limits exceeding $200,000. He purchased a sailboat. A sailboat? 42-foot yacht. $135,000, financed. First payment came due yesterday. Without access to your accounts, he can't cover it. I set down the report, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. What else is coming due? Everything. The apartment lease requires monthly payments of $6,300. The yacht has a monthly note of $4,100. The credit cards have minimum payments totaling approximately $9,200 monthly. His gym membership, the car lease, the country club fees he joined last month all require regular payments he's been funding through your accounts. Rachel's voice cut in from the speakerphone. We froze his access Tuesday morning. It's Friday. He's missed his first round of payment deadlines. By Monday, creditors will start calling. Monday arrived with the precision of a legal execution. My assistant forwarded me the first sign at 10:15 a.m., a screenshot Maya had posted to her Instagram story, then quickly deleted. The image showed her phone screen, displaying 19 missed calls from numbers she'd labeled Boat Company, Amex, and Apartment MGMT. The caption read, "When did adulting get so complicated?" By noon, Roland had called my office 6 times. I didn't answer. By Tuesday afternoon, Rachel's team reported that creditors had begun legal proceedings. The yacht company had filed a claim. 2 credit card companies had sent demand letters. The luxury apartment complex had issued a 3-day notice. He's scrambling, Rachel reported during our weekly briefing. His attorney contacted us this morning requesting an emergency conference. Roland wants to negotiate access to accounts to meet basic obligations. Basic obligations, I repeated, thinking of the yacht he'd purchased 3 weeks ago, anticipating my wealth would fund his new life indefinitely. He's claiming financial hardship, Rachel continued, a note of amusement in her voice. Says he can't maintain his standard of living without account access. What did you tell him? That he should have considered that before committing fraud. The court's order stands until the hearing next week. On Wednesday, Roland appeared at my foundation office. Security called first, asking if they should allow him access. I considered refusing, then changed my mind. I wanted to see this. He looked different. The confidence that had defined his presentation, the straight posture, the practiced smile had crumbled. His suit was wrinkled, like he'd slept in it. His hair wasn't styled. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that comes from consecutive sleepless nights. Isabella. He stood in my doorway, hands shaking slightly. We need to talk. We have lawyers for that, Roland. Please. The word sounded foreign in his mouth, like a language he'd never learned properly. I made mistakes. I can see that now. But freezing the accounts, I can't pay my bills. Creditors are calling constantly. The apartment complex is threatening eviction. I just need temporary access until we work this out. I studied him carefully. This man who'd spent 4 years methodically stealing my wealth while pretending to love me. The bills you can't pay, I said slowly. The yacht payment, the luxury apartment you rented for Maya, the credit cards you opened using my estate as collateral. Those bills? His jaw tightened. I was planning for our future. Your future with Maya. Using my money. I stood, walking to the window. You spent 4 years building a life funded entirely by my wealth. You purchased assets anticipating continued access to accounts you had no legal right to control. And now that access is restricted, you're discovering what your actual financial situation looks like. I supported you. You supported yourself, Roland. With my money. The accountant's report was very thorough. $3.2 million over 4 years. Not $1 of legitimate income. The color drained from his face. He hadn't known we'd completed the audit. The court hearing is next week, I continued calmly. Until then, the freeze remains in place. If you can't meet your financial obligations, I suggest you consider employment. I hear that's how most people fund their lifestyles. Isabella. Security will see you out. He left without another word, his shoulders hunched, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against marble floors he'd once claimed as his own. I watched him through the window, a figure growing smaller as he crossed the plaza toward the parking garage where his leased Tesla was likely accumulating repo notices. The empire he'd built on my wealth was collapsing, one missed payment at a time. And we hadn't even reached court yet. The text came through at 2:47 a.m. on a Saturday, 3 days before the court hearing. I wasn't sleeping, hadn't been sleeping properly since this entire situation began, so I saw the notification immediately. Unknown number. The message was brief, urgent, almost desperate. This is Maya. I need to talk to you. Please. It's important. I stared at the screen for a full minute, weighing options. Rachel would advise against direct contact. Every interaction with Maya could complicate the legal proceedings, create opportunities for misinterpretation. But curiosity won, along with something else, a sense that the carefully constructed alliance between Roland and his pregnant mistress was showing cracks. I responded, my attorney's contact information is public record. 3 dots appeared immediately, indicating she was typing. I can't involve lawyers. Not yet. Please, just coffee. 1 hour. I'll come to you. Against my better judgment, I sent her an address, a cafe near my downtown office, public enough to prevent any accusations of intimidation, neutral enough to avoid the emotional weight of my spaces. Maya arrived exactly on time, which surprised me. She looked different from the polished woman in Roland's social media posts. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, wearing jeans, and an oversized sweater that couldn't quite hide her growing pregnancy. She looked young, younger than I'd realized, probably mid-20s, with the kind of exhaustion that comes from weeks of sustained stress. She ordered decaf coffee and sat across from me, hands wrapped around the cup like she was trying to absorb its warmth. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice softer than I expected. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm curious why you wanted to," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Our attorneys can handle any necessary communication." "That's the thing." She looked down at her coffee. "I'm not sure Roland's attorney is representing my interests anymore." "I'm not sure Roland is either." I waited, saying nothing. "When did you find out?" Maya asked suddenly, looking up. "About us, I mean. About the baby." 3 weeks ago. I overheard a conversation between you and Roland on my terrace." Her face paled slightly. "The day he was talking about the estate transfer. About his plan." "Yes." She nodded slowly, processing this. "So you've known the whole time? While he was posting those videos, while we were moving into the mansion, you knew?" "I knew." "And you just let him keep going? Let him make all those posts, all those plans?" Her voice held genuine confusion, like she couldn't comprehend the strategy. "I let him document his fraud in a public, permanent format," I corrected gently. "Every post, every claim of ownership, every celebration evidence." Maya set down her coffee cup, her hands trembling slightly. "He told me you'd never fight back. He said you were too heartbroken, too broken. That signing those papers meant you'd given up. Roland makes a lot of assumptions about people he doesn't actually understand." She laughed then, a bitter sound. "I'm learning that." She looked out the window, watching early morning joggers pass by. "The accounts froze Tuesday. Did you know that?" "I filed the motion," I confirmed. "He didn't tell me it was coming. 1 minute, we're planning renovations to the mansion. And the next, every card is declined. The apartment complex is threatening eviction. Creditors are calling constantly. Roland keeps saying it's temporary, that his lawyer will fix it. But..." She trailed off. "But you're starting to realize it won't be fixed," I finished. She nodded. 3 days ago, Roland came back to the apartment, the one he rented for us with your money. He was frantic, pacing, making calls. He told me we needed to liquidate some assets quickly. He wanted me to sell jewelry he'd given me. Except..." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small box, setting it on the table between us. "When I checked the appraisal certificate, I found this." I opened the box. Inside was a diamond bracelet I recognized immediately from my grandmother's collection. Pieces I'd kept in my private safe. "He stole from you," Maya said quietly. "Then gave the jewelry to me and told me to sell it when he needed cash." I closed the box, my jaw tight. "Did you?" "No." That's when I started really looking at everything, really listening to what he was saying. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages. "These are texts from the last week. Read them." I took her phone, scanning the conversation. Roland's messages grew increasingly desperate as the days progressed, demands for Maya to contact her parents for money, suggestions that she could take out loans using the baby as justification, even a proposal that she should approach me directly to negotiate some kind of settlement. "He told me to ask you for money," Maya said, her voice hollow. "Last night. He said I should play up the pregnancy, make you feel guilty, convince you that freezing the accounts was hurting an innocent child. His exact words were, 'Use the baby as leverage.'" I handed back her phone. "And instead you texted me at 2 a.m., asking to meet." "I'm 26 years old," she said suddenly. "I've made terrible decisions, obviously. Getting involved with a married man tops the list. But I didn't think I was the kind of person who would help someone steal from his wife. When Roland and I started, he told me his marriage was over, that you were keeping him trapped in a loveless arrangement because you were too proud to admit failure. He painted himself as this victim of circumstance. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him, she corrected. There's a difference. But sitting in that apartment, watching him panic about losing access to your money, listening to him strategize about how to manipulate you through me and this baby, she placed a hand on her stomach protectively. I realized I don't know who he actually is. And the person I'm seeing now? He's not someone I want raising my child. The cafe had filled up around us. Morning customers ordering complicated lattes and pastries. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the small drama unfolding in the corner booth. What do you want, Maya? I asked finally. I want to tell the truth, she said simply. In court. Under oath if necessary. About the conversations I heard, the plans Roland made, the things he told me about manipulating the estate transfer, about him stealing your jewelry. All of it. I studied her carefully, looking for signs of deception. For angles Roland might be playing, but all I saw was a young woman who'd gotten involved in something far more complex than she'd anticipated, now trying to find an exit. Why? I asked. This makes your life significantly more complicated. Roland will turn on you completely. You'll be testifying against the father of your child. Because it's right, she said quietly. And because I'm about to be a mother. I need to be able to look my child in the eye someday and say I did the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it cost me something. She paused. My baby deserves a father who's honest. If Roland isn't that person, I'd rather know now. I pulled out my phone and dialed Rachel's number. She answered on the second ring, alert despite the early hour. I have someone who wants to talk to you, I said. Someone with information about Roland's planning and execution of the estate fraud. Maya took the phone when I offered it, her hand steady now, her voice clear as she began explaining to Rachel what she knew. Roland called my office 14 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. His voicemails grew progressively more panicked, first angry, then pleading, then threatening, then desperate. The final message came at 6:47 p.m. Maya's gone. His voice was barely recognizable, cracking on the edges. She took her things and left. She won't answer my calls. Isabella, what did you do? What did you say to her? I deleted the message without responding. Rachel texted an hour later. Maya's testimony is devastating. We're adding her deposition to evidence. Court Monday. Roland's attorney requested emergency postponement. Denied. I looked out my office window at the city lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Roland was realizing that his carefully constructed plan had collapsed completely. No access to money. No complicit partner. No escape route. Just consequences, approaching with the inevitability of Monday morning. Roland showed up Sunday night, the evening before our court hearing. Security called at 8:43 p.m., informing me that he was at the gate, demanding entry to his property. I almost had them turn him away but changed my mind. Some conversations needed to happen face to face, and I wanted to see Roland's reaction when his world finally, definitively collapsed. I met him in the foyer neutral territory, close enough to the door that security could intervene if necessary, far enough from my personal spaces that he couldn't claim any emotional advantage. He looked terrible. The polish that had defined him throughout our marriage had completely eroded. His suit was the same one he'd worn to my office days ago, now more wrinkled. His face was drawn, exhausted, with the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't slept properly in a week. But his posture was rigid, aggressive. His jaw set in a way that suggested he'd come here ready for combat. "We need to talk," he said without preamble, stepping into the foyer like he still had the right. "About tomorrow. About this entire insane situation you've created." "The situation I've created?" I kept my voice calm, clinical. "That's an interesting perspective. Don't play games, Isabella." He moved closer, his voice rising. "You've frozen my accounts, turned Maya against me, and now you're dragging us into court over assets that are legally half mine. This ends now. How do you propose it ends, Roland? You drop the fraud claims, you release the account freeze. You give me what I'm entitled to under California marital property law, 50% of everything acquired during our marriage." He pulled papers from his jacket pocket, shoving them toward me. "My attorney prepared settlement documents. Sign them, and we can avoid tomorrow's hearing entirely. I didn't take the papers, and if I don't, then I'll let the judge decide. And trust me, Isabella, you won't like that outcome. His confidence was forced, brittle, cracking at the edges. You're not as powerful as you think you are. 4 years of marriage means I'm entitled to significant assets. The court will see that. Is that what your attorney told you? That's what the law says. I walked past him toward the study, my study, where this had all begun 3 weeks ago. He followed, his footsteps heavy against the marble floor. The study was exactly as I'd left it that morning, except for one addition, a large presentation board set up on an easel, the kind used for corporate presentations. On it, I'd arranged a timeline of Roland's deception, complete with printed screenshots, financial documents, and photographs. What is this? Roland asked, his voice wary. Tomorrow's evidence, I replied simply. I thought you should see it first. Professional courtesy. I gestured to the board. The timeline started 4 years ago, documenting key moments in Roland's systematic fraud. Each entry had supporting evidence attached. Month 6. Roland begins investigating Isabella's full financial portfolio, confirmed by recovered browser history and consultation requests to 3 estate attorneys. Roland's face paled slightly, but he said nothing. I continued, pointing to the next section. Year 2. Roland opens first unauthorized credit card using estate address as collateral. Total of 5 cards over 2 years, combined spending of $347,000. Those were legitimate expenses. Year 3. Roland initiates relationship with Maya. Text records show discussion of Isabella's wealth within the first month of their affair. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the recording from the terrace. Would you like to hear yourself telling Maya that you'd been planning this since month 6? That I actually loved you and you found that useful? The color drained from his face entirely now. Month 1, Year 4. Roland arranges for Maya's pregnancy. Text messages show this was strategically planned to establish future financial claims. I moved to the next section. Week 1, current month. Roland manipulates Isabella into signing estate transfer documents. Records show he consulted with attorney specifically about exploiting prenuptial agreement clauses. You can't prove. Week 2. Roland posts 14 social media updates claiming ownership of Isabella's estate. Each post is time-stamped, geotagged, and includes explicit claims to property he has no legal right to access. I pulled up his Instagram on the presentation screen I'd set up. These posts have been preserved, authenticated, and will be submitted as evidence tomorrow. Your attorney should have warned you about this. Roland stared at the screen showing his own face, smiling confidently in front of my sculpture garden, claiming it as his new beginning. Social media evidence is increasingly admissible in divorce cases involving asset disputes and fraud claims. I continued, my voice steady. Courts particularly value digital evidence that demonstrates intent and behavior patterns. You've provided an exhaustive record of both. You're taking things out of context. Week 3. Maya's Instagram story confirms she understands the estate belongs to Isabella, that a transfer is pending, and that she and Roland plan to occupy the property regardless. I displayed Maya's deleted post, recovered by my legal team's digital forensics expert. That's conspiracy to commit fraud, Roland. Not just divorce proceedings anymore. His breathing was shallow now, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. But the best part, I continued, moving to the final section of the timeline, is week 4. Would you like to see? I didn't wait for his answer. I pulled up the final documents, Maya's sworn deposition. 47 pages of detailed testimony about Roland's planning, his theft of my grandmother's jewelry, his explicit instructions for her to manipulate me, his admission that the entire marriage was calculated fraud. Maya testified. His voice was barely a whisper. She gave a deposition? Voluntarily. 3 days ago. She was very thorough. I handed him a copy of the transcript. She confirmed every conversation, every plan, every manipulation. She provided text messages I didn't have. She authenticated the timeline independently. And she'll be at court tomorrow, ready to testify under oath if necessary. Roland sank into the chair, my chair, his hands shaking as he flipped through the transcript. I watched his face change as he read Maya's words, saw his carefully constructed defense strategy collapse page by page. This isn't. He looked up at me, his expression desperate. Isabella, we can work this out. We don't need to go to court. I made mistakes, yes, but we can negotiate. Negotiate what, Roland? You stole $3.2 million over 4 years. You committed fraud to access my estate. You manipulated documents, committed identity theft for the credit cards, and conspired with Maya to execute a scheme to permanently acquire assets you had no legal claim to. These aren't mistakes. This is criminal behavior. You're exaggerating. Your social media posts show you claiming ownership of property valued at $40 million. Your text messages show premeditation of fraud. Maya's testimony confirms conscious intent to deceive. The forensic accounting report documents systematic theft. I moved closer, my voice dropping. You documented everything yourself, Roland. Every arrogant post, every confident claim, every celebration of what you thought was your victory. Evidence. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. You can't destroy my life over a misunderstanding about marital assets. Misunderstanding. The word came out sharper than I'd intended. You told Maya I was emotionally compromised and easy to manipulate. You stole my grandmother's jewelry and gave it to your mistress. You spent 4 years pretending to love me while calculating exactly how to steal my life's work. I did love you. You loved my money, Roland. There's a difference. I gestured to the timeline board. Every piece of this evidence will be submitted tomorrow. The social media posts, the financial records, Maya's testimony, the recovered text messages, the forensic analysis of your spending patterns. The judge will see exactly what you are. Roland's face had gone from pale to gray. He looked at the board, at the evidence arranged with devastating precision, at the documentation of his own deception presented back to him like a mirror. What do you want? He asked finally, his voice hollow. Name it. I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't do this in court. Don't make this public. I want exactly what the law entitles me to, Roland. My estate, my assets, my grandmother's jewelry returned, and full accountability for every dollar you stole. I'll be ruined. Yes, I said simply, you will be. Just like you planned to ruin me. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant he realized there was no escape, no negotiation, no clever manipulation that would save him. His shoulders slumped, his expression crumbling into something close to desperation. Court convenes at 9 tomorrow, I said quietly. Security will see you out. He left without another word. Walking through my foyer, for what we both knew was the last time, I watched him go. This man who'd spent 4 years studying my weaknesses while missing the most important truth about me. I built an empire by never underestimating my opponents. Roland's catastrophic error was underestimating me. Tomorrow, he'd face the consequences. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. I'd envisioned something grand and imposing, but Judge Patricia Reeves's chambers were practical, efficient, decorated with law books and framed diplomas rather than dramatic architecture. The fluorescent lighting hummed quietly overhead as I took my seat beside Rachel, who looked every bit the predator she was paid to be. Tailored navy suit, leather briefcase open with documents arranged in precise order. Roland sat across the aisle with his attorney, a man named David Garrett who'd spent the pre-hearing minutes whispering urgently to his client. Roland looked worse than he had last night, if that was possible. His suit was different but no cleaner, his face drawn with the kind of exhaustion that comes from knowing you're about to lose everything. Judge Reeves entered at precisely 9 o'clock. A woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd seen every manipulation, heard every excuse, and had no patience for either. I've reviewed the preliminary motions, she began without preamble, settling into her chair. This is a contested divorce involving significant assets and allegations of fraud. Miss Morrison, you filed the emergency motion. Let's begin there. Rachel stood, her movements precise and confident. Your Honor, We're requesting permanent asset protection orders and dissolution of all claims made by Mr. Kitchen regarding my client's separate property. The evidence demonstrates a systematic, premeditated scheme to fraudulently acquire assets through manipulation and deceit. She approached the bench with the first exhibit, the timeline I'd shown Roland last night, now professionally bound with authenticated documents attached. Judge Reeves took her time reviewing it, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Garrett?" The judge looked to Roland's attorney. "Your response?" Garrett stood, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, Mr. Kitchen acknowledges that certain judgments may have been questionable. However, California is a community property state. Assets acquired during marriage are subject to equal division regardless of individual contributions. My client is entitled to 50% of marital property. These fraud allegations are simply my client's ex-wife attempting to avoid her legal obligations." "Miss Morrison?" Rachel's smile was cold and surgical. "Your Honor, California law does provide for equal division of community property. However, the assets in question are not community property. They are separate property acquired by Miss Hadley 7 years before her marriage to Mr. Kitchen, purchased with inherited funds from her grandmother's estate, maintained separately throughout the marriage. She submitted documents that my forensic accountant had spent weeks compiling: purchase records, inheritance documentation, tax returns showing clear separation of assets. Furthermore," Rachel continued, "California law provides exceptions to equal division when one spouse has wasted marital assets or engaged in fraud. We have extensive documentation of Mr. Kitchen's unauthorized expenditures totaling $3.2 million, which we are requesting be classified as separate debt assigned solely to him." Judge Reeves was reviewing the financial records now, her eyebrows raising slightly. "Mr. Kitchen spent over $3 million in 4 years, without Miss Hadley's knowledge or authorization, Your Honor," Rachel confirmed. "The forensic accounting report details every transaction: designer clothing, luxury vehicles, a yacht purchased 3 weeks ago, all funded through accounts containing solely my client's earnings." "Your Honor, if I may," Garrett attempted to interject. "You may not," Judge Reeves said quietly, still reading. "Let me finish reviewing this." The courtroom fell silent except for the sound of pages turning. I watched Roland's face as the judge read through the evidence of his spending. His jaw was clenched, hands gripping the table edge. Maya sat 3 rows behind us. She'd insisted on attending despite not being called to testify yet. Her presence was clearly affecting Roland, who hadn't looked in her direction once. "Miss Morrison," Judge Reeves finally spoke, "I'm seeing documentation here of social media posts where Mr. Kitchen claims ownership of the estate. Walk me through this." Rachel submitted her tablet, loaded with Roland's Instagram account. "Your Honor, Mr. Kitchen posted 14 updates over 3 weeks, each claiming ownership or permanent residence at Miss Hadley's separate property estate. He tagged the location, described future plans for the property, and explicitly stated the assets were his. These posts were made after he manipulated Miss Hadley into signing transfer documents under false pretenses." The judge scrolled through the posts, her expression hardening with each image of Roland posing in my home, claiming it as his victory. "Additionally," Rachel continued, "we have testimony from Miss Maya Rodriguez, who was involved with Mr. Kitchen during his marriage to my client. She's provided sworn deposition confirming Mr. Kitchen's premeditated intent to fraudulently acquire my client's assets. She's present today if Your Honor wishes to hear her testimony directly." Judge Reeves looked to the gallery where Maya sat. "Miss Rodriguez, please approach." Maya stood carefully, her pregnancy visible now as she walked to the witness chair. She was sworn in, her voice steady as she confirmed her identity. "Miss Rodriguez," Judge Reeves began, "you were in a relationship with Mr. Kitchen while he was married to Miss Hadley?" "Yes, Your Honor," Maya replied quietly, "for approximately 18 months. And during this relationship, Mr. Kitchen discussed his marriage and his wife's assets with you?" "Yes." Maya's voice was stronger now. "He told me he'd been planning to acquire her estate since the first year of their marriage. He said she was emotionally compromised and easy to manipulate. He described his entire strategy: gaining her trust, positioning himself as a supportive husband, then manipulating her into signing transfer documents. Did you witness any of this planning directly? Yes, Your Honor. I was present during phone calls with his attorney about exploiting prenuptial agreement clauses. I heard him practicing conversations he planned to have with Miss Hadley to make her feel guilty about keeping their assets separate. He told me explicitly that once the transfer processed, he would have legal claim to everything she'd built. Judge Reeves leaned back in her chair, her gaze moving to Roland, who was staring at the table in front of him. Mr. Kitchen, do you dispute Miss Rodriguez's testimony? Garrett whispered urgently to Roland, who finally looked up. Your Honor, my relationship with Isabella was complicated. I may have said things in frustration that I didn't mean. Did you or did you not tell Miss Rodriguez that you were planning to acquire your wife's estate through manipulation? Judge Reeves interrupted, her tone sharp. Silence stretched across the courtroom. Mr. Kitchen, answer the question. I discussed possibilities, legal strategies, but fraud was never. Your Honor, Rachel interjected, we have recorded conversations confirming Mr. Kitchen's intent. Miss Hadley recorded a conversation between Mr. Kitchen and Mr. Kitchen Rodriguez where he explicitly detailed his 4-year plan to steal her assets. She submitted the audio file, and the courtroom filled with Roland's voice from that day on the terrace, casually explaining how he'd manipulated me, how the pregnancy was brilliant timing, how I'd trusted him because I actually loved him. Judge Reeves listened to the entire recording without interruption. When it finished, she removed her glasses and fixed Roland with a look that could have frozen water. Mr. Garrett, does your client have anything to say in his defense? Garrett looked defeated. Your Honor, my client acknowledges poor judgment. We're requesting leniency and fair division of assets under California community property law. Fair division? Judge Reeves's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. Mr. Kitchen spent 4 years systematically defrauding his wife. He documented his crime on social media. He manipulated legal documents. He stole jewelry from her grandmother's estate. And you're requesting fair division? She turned to Roland directly. Mr. Kitchen, I've presided over divorce cases for 23 years. I have never seen such blatant, premeditated fraud. You didn't just betray your marriage, you committed theft, conspiracy, and identity fraud through those credit cards. Your Honor, I'm not finished. Judge Reeves opened her legal pad, writing as she spoke. I'm ruling as follows. All assets claimed by Mr. Kitchen are restored to Miss Hadley as her separate property. The estate transfer documents signed under duress and fraudulent pretenses are void. Mr. Kitchen has no claim to any property acquired by Miss Hadley before, during, or after this marriage. Roland's face went white. Furthermore, the $3.2 million in unauthorized expenditures are classified as separate debt assigned solely to Mr. Kitchen. He is ordered to repay Miss Hadley this amount through structured payments or asset liquidation. Your Honor, my client doesn't have. Then he should have considered that before committing fraud, Judge Reeves said coldly. Additionally, I'm issuing a permanent restraining order preventing Mr. Kitchen from accessing, claiming, or approaching any property owned by Miss Hadley. All joint accounts remain frozen until final divorce decree, at which point Mr. Kitchen will receive 0% of assets. This is not a community property division. This is restitution for fraud. She signed the order with finality. Mr. Kitchen, you are fortunate I'm limiting this to civil court. I'm forwarding copies of this evidence to the district attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel struck, and it was over. I stood outside the courthouse 30 minutes later, the November morning surprisingly warm. Rachel was on the phone with my accountant, already beginning the process of transferring all accounts back to my sole control. Maya approached me carefully, her hands folded over her stomach. Thank you, she said quietly, for not making me the villain in there. You made your own choices, Maya, but you also corrected them. That matters. She nodded, tears forming. I hope someday you can forgive me. I hope someday you can forgive yourself. I replied, not unkindly. Take care of your baby. Make better choices going forward. She walked away, and I turned back to face the courthouse. Through the windows, I could see Roland still sitting at the defendant's table, his attorney packing up documents while Roland stared at nothing. He'd lost everything. The estate he'd claimed, the wealth he'd counted on, the future he'd planned with money that was never his. I felt no satisfaction in his destruction, only relief that justice had finally, definitively been served. My phone buzzed. A text from my foundation director. Board meeting at 2. Ready to discuss the new children's hospital wing? I smiled. Life continued. Empires rebuilt. Justice, eventually, prevailed. I walked toward my car, toward my future, toward everything Roland had tried to steal and failed to take. The tables hadn't just turned, they'd been completely reset. And this time, I was the only one holding the keys. Chapter 8. Public Humiliation and Final Justice. The first article appeared 3 hours after court adjourned. Billionaire fraud. Husband's 4-year scheme to steal wife's fortune. Exposed in court. I was sitting in my foundation office when my communications director forwarded the link, her message simply reading, "It started." The article, published by a major financial news outlet, detailed the court proceedings with brutal precision, Roland's systematic fraud. The social media posts, documenting his arrogance, Maya's testimony, the $3.2 million in unauthorized spending. By evening, the story had been picked up by 17 national outlets. By morning, it was international news. The Instagram fraudster, how Roland Kitchen documented his own downfall. This headline appeared on a major tech news site, complete with screenshots of Roland's deleted posts. The article analyzed how social media evidence had become crucial in modern fraud cases, using Roland as a cautionary tale. They'd recovered every post, every comment, every arrogant claim of ownership he'd made. The comments section exceeded 15,000 responses within 12 hours. Most expressed outrage at Roland's audacity, sympathy for me, and mocking disbelief that someone could be foolish enough to document their own crime so thoroughly. He literally posted evidence for the prosecution, one commenter wrote. "This is Darwin Award material." Rachel called that afternoon. "Have you seen the media coverage?" "Some of it," I admitted, scrolling through another article featuring the courtroom sketch artist's rendering of Roland's face as Judge Reeves delivered her ruling. "Your communications team is fielding 63 interview requests. Everyone wants your story, financial empowerment, angle, fraud victim advocacy, how you rebuilt after betrayal." She paused. "You don't have to respond to any of them." "I know," I said quietly. The truth was, I didn't need to respond. The court records spoke for themselves. Roland had provided all the narrative anyone needed. Kitchen's career, built on borrowed money, destroyed by Instagram. The business journals were particularly merciless. They'd traced Roland's supposed entrepreneurial ventures, the consulting firm with no clients, the investment advisory service with no licenses, the app development company that never developed apps. Every claim he'd made about his professional success was exposed as fabrication, funded entirely by my wealth, while he posed as a self-made businessman. His LinkedIn profile, once boasting about strategic acquisitions and wealth management, had been taken down within 24 hours. Too late, screenshots circulated across social media, juxtaposed with court documents proving he'd never earned legitimate income during our entire marriage. Former associates began coming forward. A gym owner confirmed Roland had unpaid membership fees totaling $12,000. The country club he'd joined 3 months ago issued a statement that his membership had been revoked for non-payment. The yacht company publicly announced they were repossessing the boat. Each revelation added another layer to Roland's public humiliation, painting a picture of a man who'd built an entire identity on stolen money and carefully constructed lies. By the third day, the story had taken on a life of its own. Maya Rodriguez speaks. "I thought I knew him." Maya gave a single interview to a women's advocacy magazine, explaining how she'd been manipulated, how she'd eventually recognized Roland's patterns, how she'd chosen to testify to protect her unborn child from a father capable of such deception. The interview was honest, vulnerable, and painted her as another of Roland's victims rather than his accomplice. The public response was mixed. Some praised her courage, others questioned her initial participation. But the dominant narrative remained focused on Roland as the architect of the fraud. Hadley Foundation announces record donation, despite personal turmoil. This was my favorite headline. While Roland's reputation crumbled, my foundation had quietly announced a $15 million commitment to children's hospital research. The article contrasted my continued philanthropic work with Roland's exposed fraud, noting that I'd maintained professional obligations throughout the entire legal process. The message was clear. Roland's betrayal had failed to diminish what I'd built. If anything, it had highlighted the stark difference between earned success and stolen wealth. A week after the court ruling, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered, "Isabella." Roland's voice was barely recognizable, hollow, defeated, stripped of the confident arrogance that had defined him. "Have you seen what they're writing about me?" "I've seen some of it," I replied neutrally. "They're destroying me. Every article, every post, my name is ruined. No one will hire me. Creditors are filing lawsuits. I can't even get a decent apartment because landlords Google my name and find all of this." His voice cracked. "I made mistakes, but I don't deserve this public execution." I stood at my office window, looking out at the city skyline. "Roland, you spent 4 years systematically stealing from me. You documented your fraud on social media. You manipulated legal documents. You stole my grandmother's jewelry, and when you got caught, you showed no remorse, only panic that your scheme had failed. I was desperate. You were greedy," I corrected gently, "and you assumed the consequences would never come. But actions have consequences. The media coverage, the public humiliation, the ruined reputation. Those are the natural results of your choices." Silence stretched across the line. "What am I supposed to do now?" he finally asked, his voice small. "Rebuild," I said simply. "The same way I would have had to rebuild if your fraud had succeeded. Find employment, pay your debts, take accountability for what you've done. It's what most people do when they face consequences. Isabella." "Goodbye, Roland." I ended the call and blocked the number. 6 weeks later, I stood on the mansion's terrace, my mansion's terrace, watching sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. The sculpture garden glowed in the evening light. Roses from my grandmother's estate blooming in perfectly maintained beds. Rachel had finalized the divorce decree that morning. Roland had signed without contest, stripped of any leverage, any claims, any power. The $3.2 million would be repaid through wage garnishment from whatever employment he eventually found. My grandmother's jewelry had been recovered from Maya, who'd surrendered it voluntarily. Everything Roland had tried to steal was mine again. But more than that, I'd emerged from his betrayal stronger, clearer, more certain of my own resilience. I'd built an empire once from my grandmother's modest inheritance. I'd defended that empire against someone who'd shared my bed and my life while plotting to destroy me. And I'd won. Not through manipulation or deception, but through documentation, strategic planning, and unwavering resolve. My phone buzzed with a message from my foundation director. "New hospital wing, groundbreaking, scheduled for next month. Your grandmother would be proud." I smiled, tears forming unexpectedly. She would be proud. Not because I'd defeated Roland, but because I'd refused to let his betrayal define me or diminish what I'd built. The media coverage would eventually fade. Roland's name would become a cautionary tale, a footnote in discussions about fraud and social media evidence. But my work would continue, foundations funded, businesses acquired, lives improved through strategic philanthropy. Roland had tried to steal my empire. Instead, he'd only proven how unshakable it truly was. I walked back inside my home, through rooms I'd designed and paid for, past awards I'd earned through legitimate work, into a future Roland would never touch. The sunset behind me painted the mansion in golden light, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been documented, publicized, and permanently recorded as a reminder that no amount of manipulation could steal what had been earned through integrity. Roland Kitchen's name would be associated with fraud and failure. Mine would remain associated with resilience, philanthropy, and the kind of strength that comes from surviving betrayal without becoming bitter. The future stretched ahead bright, uncompromised, and entirely mine to build. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.